regular vetted VA group, which is for veterans, service members, and their spouses. And then we also have a professional group for real estate agents and mortgage professionals. That's called Vetted VA for Professionals Only. And it's really one of the only places in Facebook, I think, that we have a strict no solicitation rule. There's lots of support and camaraderie. And so I really hope that you guys, join it if you aren't already there. So in
Definitely
these
make sure if
groups,
you're, oh, go ahead.
oh no, I was going to say in these groups, we're getting a lot of questions about VA assumptions, and that was the impetus for this class. Go ahead, Brandy.
Oh, I was just going to say, in joining the groups, just make sure that you answer all the questions to join the groups. And we do have some crossover between real estate agents or professionals who are also veterans.
Mhm.
And our veteran facing group is for strictly veterans who are not professionals. If you are a veteran and a professional, please join our professionals group.
Just a quick introduction. My name is Stephanie Saffholm, and I am a mortgage broker licensed in Washington and Hawaii. I've been in the industry for about 9 years, and I currently live in Oahu. Now, also, you may hear some birds chirping or some chickens, and that's just part of living here. So, okay, Brandy, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm Brandy Brickler. I am a mortgage broker with Edge Home Finance. I've been in VA for probably about 3 years. I am a Navy veteran myself. I have 10 plus years in the industry, and I'm licensed in about 8 states. So they're listed all there for you. Yeah, that's me. Oh, and I'm located in Texas.
Like I mentioned, we're getting a lot of questions about VA assumptions. It's an ever-changing and evolving market. Everybody is learning about, how to do these VA assumptions. Like when I say everybody, I mean the lenders, the buyers, the sellers, right? Everybody, we're all learning, and things change. So it's not a static information. The VA comes out with circulars and updates the information, and that's why we wanted to have um, this class today. Some of the questions we're getting is like, can I sell my home with the VA assumption? How do I find an assumable property? How do I fund the gap between the purchase price and the loan balance? And is it worth it to do a VA assumption?
Yeah, and where all of this information is coming from is from Chapter 5 of the VA Lender Handbook, which is easily searchable online. You can look up some of the questions that you might have specifically there, and also the newest circular that has come out regarding assumption, which is the 26-23-10, which is also searchable online. And let's hop into it.
What is an assumption? So it's the process through the current lender or servicer that allows an eligible borrower to take over or assume another borrower's VA loan and keep the same rate and terms. It is one of the benefits of a VA loan, right? If you purchase with a VA loan, it's in the note that your loan is assumable. And there's also a stipulation that allows you to release your liability so that you can purchase in the future. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute.
So who can assume a VA loan? So anyone can assume a VA loan. There are some differences between a veteran or a civilian actually assuming your loan, but there's a couple reasons why you might want to entertain the idea if you're a seller. So obviously it's a sad situation in divorce, but sometimes this might be a good solution between divorcing individuals or divorcing veterans even. Helping a seller out of financial hardship. So we understand the market is tough. This might be an option for you instead of foreclosure. And then obviously for the buyer, it is an option to get in a lower interest rate while interest rates are pretty high right now.
So again, anyone can assume a veteran's active mortgage. They do not need to be a veteran to do it. But there is a difference for the seller between selling to a civilian and selling to a veteran with full entitlement. So if you sell to a civilian, right, they don't have VA loan entitlement, your entitlement as a seller is going to be tied up in that loan for the life of that loan. So until they refinance or sell and that loan is paid off. That will limit your ability to have that 0% down benefit. It will also limit your purchasing power, right? Let's say there's a little bit of entitlement left over. you're not going to have your full entitlement left over. And if that buyer forecloses, that is also going to be on your certificate of eligibility and possibly on your credit report. So something to think about.
Now, the differences are when another veteran is assuming your entitlement or assuming your loan as a seller, right? That buyer can substitute their entitlement for your entitlement. That means that you get your full entitlement back, or whatever entitlement was tied up with that previous purchase, and then you will be able to purchase again. So, and this is also ensuring that you're not impacted by future foreclosures or financial hardships of the person who assumes your loan.
So before you even consider selling to a buyer who wants to assume your loan, there's some things you need to think about as a seller. We suggest that you have this conversation with your listing agent before you even list the property, right? So, for example, how much equity do you have in your home? If it's a huge gap, it might be harder to sell with an assumption because it may be harder for that assuming buyer to come up with that gap of funds, right? Also, what are your future VA loan needs? Do you want to be able to buy with your VA loan in the future? Well, then you may want to consider only selling to a veteran with full entitlement. And then also, does the timeline of the loan assumption affect you? So the VA has come out with a recent circular asking servicers to be more prompt with their decision. In fact, they've given us a timeline, or the servicer lender a timeline of 30 to 45 days to come up with that initial loan decision. However, we are also seeing them take 3 months to 6 months. So there's a little bit of uncertainty there. So are you okay with that uncertainty?
And as a buyer, you should consider the following before assuming. So you need to understand whether or not you have the capability to fund the difference between the loan balance and the sales price. So that's a very, very big question that sort of is a big roadblock for most buyers who are going to try and find an assumable mortgage. Now, of course, there is a funding fee associated with assuming someone's property. It's a 0.5% funding fee. However, if you are 10% or greater disabled, you will not pay that funding fee. And again, you need to think about the timeline for purchasing. It does take a little bit of time. We are seeing that length of time close from, what might be 6 months to closer to 3 months. But again, everybody has to be on the same page as far as the timeline. And then you just really want to know if the purchase price of that home is worth it. So we're in a changing market, and an appraisal is not a requirement. So you need to make sure that you're purchasing at an appropriate market value for that home. Sorry, I went the wrong direction. There you go.
So we're going to go over a couple of the actual rules that are in both the the newest VA circular, and also Chapter 5, Section 6 of the VA handbook. What do they say? What is it saying about assumptions? What are the actual guidelines? So number one, assumptions can only be processed and closed by the holder, which is the servicer or lender of the current loan. So even if you've gotten pre-approved with another loan officer, and maybe they're helping you figure out like if the documents are good and that kind of stuff, they will have nothing to do with your purchase of this property. There's also a VA statute and regs require an assumption to be approved if the loan's current, the assumer has entered into a contract to purchase the property, and if they're creditworthy per the VA guidelines.
And then right now, the Veterans Administration has put out a recent circular as of last year that they're requiring servicers to come to a credit decision on an assumption within 35 to 45 days. And that's dependent on the type of lender that you're working with. So between 35 to 45 days is the standard for a credit decision. That does not mean that the lender has to close that transaction between 30 and 45 days. They just have to give a credit decision. So it could take an additional 30 days to actually shuffle the paperwork in between and actually get that loan closed. Now, this is an important one. So we have been hearing of some assumption applications being denied. Now, just know that if you are a buyer and you believe yourself to be qualified, that you have 30 days after that credit decision, either the seller or buyer can request an appeal to see if they can get that overturned. Now, we actually have one of our vetted VA moderators who actually went through this process. She did have, she was qualified. She did appeal the decision and did get that decision overturned. So it's very important that you're keeping in communication and following these timelines, because once you're outside of that 30 days, you no longer have that ability to do that.
So number 5, the process to underwrite an assumption is the same for any other VA loan, any other purchase, right? They're going to be looking at income, credit, debts, assets, liabilities. Those are all a part of the decision. And there's not a magic VA assumption underwriting guidelines. They are using the VA guidelines. Number 6, the buyer, assuming the loan, has to pay a 0.5 funding fee of the loan, unless they are exempt from the funding fee because they have a disability rating.
Correct. Now, appraisals are not required. Now, if you are a seller, you may want to get an appraisal before, so you can get that on your own outside. So to be a negotiating factor when you're determining how much you're going to list your home for. So that's important. Now, if you're a buyer, again, there is no appraisal required. However, you're probably wanting to still get a home inspection. Those two things are not the same thing. So it's very, very important. And then, of course, your entitlement as a seller is only restored if there is a substitution of entitlement. Now, I've heard stories of veterans finding out a year later that their substitution of entitlement wasn't done. Remember, the servicer is making sure that the loan is good. They may not necessarily be following through with your substitution of entitlement. You, as a seller and buyer, may need to reach out to your VA Regional Loan Center to confirm that substitution of entitlement has been taken care of.
So let's talk a little bit about the process. I'm going to go over what the process is for a seller. It's going to be slightly different for a seller and a buyer. Obviously, they have different intentions and different things they're looking out for. But one of the biggest questions I actually get from real estate agents, right? They have a seller who has a VA loan and they're wanting to know, how do we list this as a VA assumable loan? And I usually give them a little checklist. The most important thing is the seller is having a conversation with their agent, right? About, even before they list the property, about how are they going to market this property, as a VA assumable property. Do they have an assumption packet from their lender and servicer so that they can give that to the buyer when it's asked for? Do they have a clear understanding about what the loan balance is and what that gap might be between the sales price and the loan balance? So those are all really important. It's number 3. I didn't know this as of yesterday, but now I know it today. Once the assumption packet is required, the servicer is going to assume that you are going to submit an application within 30 days. So let's say you have asked for the assumption packet and your listing is taking a little bit longer to sell, but 2 months later, someone is ready to purchase and assume the loan. You're going to have to ask for another assumption packet. And that's okay. I think it's more important that you're prepared ahead of time and that you've asked for that packet. With an accepted contract in hand, the seller and the buyer will submit the application for the assumption. It's really important that everybody is on the same page as far as communication goes. It's also, I think, important that the seller comes up with some sort of system with their agent about how to verify that the buyer has a certificate of eligibility. If you're wanting to substitute entitlement, what are the things you're going to be asking the buyer for? And then lastly, the buyer pays closing costs and assumes the mortgage. And then I don't have it right here, but the important thing that Brandy mentioned was that it's really important that you follow up to make sure your entitlement has been restored.
There's a couple of additional tips. So for you real estate agents, there might be some verbiage in your listing that includes the mortgage assumption is available for only individuals who can substitute the total amount of VA entitlement currently used. So that could be some verbiage to where you're not getting other people who are requesting the assumption. You want to attract the correct person that you're looking for to assume the loan. Now, it's probably going to drive more traffic. There's a lot of people who are out there and asking for an assumption. You know, there are
Mhm.
buyers out there who are specifically looking for this. And so, again, you're going to want to come up with something with your agent to where maybe you're going to want to verify how they're going to come up with the funds. So, that's a completely reasonable ask of someone who's asking to assume. And then, of course, just everyone know that this takes a little bit longer than the traditional process. We are seeing some sellers who are getting into an assumption with somebody, and they might let them early occupy. I'm a loan officer, so I'm not a real estate agent, but I might advise against that just in case that assumption doesn't go through. You're going to have to enter into a rental contract with those individuals.
Go ahead, Brandy.
Okay, cool. So for the buyer, you are going to you really, really, really want to work with somebody who understands the VA assumption process because you do not have a loan professional who is guiding this process for you. And it's not a typical job of your real estate agent to go
Mhm.
ahead and guide this process for you. The lender or the servicer is not in a position where they are driving the situation either. So it's very important that the real estate agent understands that they're going to be taking on a heavier role as far as communication between the lender, the sellers, the buyer. So it's very important to be working with someone who understands and is willing to walk through this process with both the
Mhm.
sellers and the
Mhm.
buyers. So you want to let your real estate agent know that you are looking for homes that actually have assumable options. Now, I have heard of agents talking buyers out of this because it takes a little bit longer for that real estate agent to actually close the process. Just remember, this is your home purchase, and you want someone who is going to walk alongside you to do what's best for you and not for them. Now we want to ask the seller for the terms. You're going to ask for the assumption packet, ask if they are prepared. And then you are going to have the same loan documentation that you probably provided to a loan officer to get qualified to go out shopping in the first place. So all of that document needs to be ready and up to date. Let's see. And of course, you may want to go on to pull your certificate of eligibility also. Now, and then again, understand that you are going to pay those closing costs. So come up with a plan on how you're actually going to pay that money.
So one of the biggest questions we get, of course, is how, as a buyer, how do we fund that gap, the difference between the purchase price and the loan balance? We have an example here. So what does that mean? Some people have no idea that even is even a thing with assumptions, right? So the contract, for example, the contract purchase price is 395, but the loan balance on this seller's loan is 275. You're assuming the 275, right, as a part of the loan assumption. So someone needs to come up with the 120,000. So that's the buyer, right? And how do you do that? The lender who you're assuming the loan from is probably not going to provide that to you. You're going to have to find other ways to bring that in. So either you have the cash on hand, right, in a money market or maybe even a TSP. I've heard of people taking out a 401ks, right, your own cash. There's people who take out a personal loan or even a secondary mortgage, a second mortgage or HELOC. Got to be really careful about some of these secondary loans, however, because the VA guidelines actually say that the any second loan needs to be assumable. And also the lender that you're assuming the loan with has to agree to these secondary financing. So that's a really important thing to remember. You can't just go out willy-nilly and get all these loans and then try to do the assumption they could deny it. The last kind of creative financing is a seller carryback, and that is where the seller is loaning you the funds, right? And you're paying them back little by little. For anything except your own cash or withdrawing from like a TSP, that those funds, those monthly payments are going to have to be um, looked at in your DTI, your debt to income ratio. So it's really important to consider these and talk with someone before you go out and do it.
Excellent. So remember, there are some closing costs involved with this process, right? So obviously, you're going to have to come up with the difference between the sales price and the loan balance. There is a $250 to $300 loan lender processing fee, obviously a credit reporting fee, your funding fee, and then there's going to be the traditional title recording and property tax fees. So you need to be prepared with that number so you understand what you're coming up with as a buyer.
And of course, what's missing on there is the appraisal fee, right? So appraisal fee is
which
not
isn't
required.
required, which
Yeah,
isn't required. However, um, you might want to get one.
yeah. So we wanted to show you some of the forms that may be required so you know ahead of time to either look for them or ask for them. Um, when you're putting an offer in for a home that has a VA assumable loan, some states are going to require special forms. So this is a Texas state form, for example, that
Mhm.
it's like an assumption addendum. I, some states are going to have this, some states aren't. It's really important that your agent, your buyer's agent knows if this exists, um, and that or is there anything else that you're going to need? So that's the first step is this offer.
And of course, so some of the forms that are going to be involved in your assumption packet are going to be the statement of purchaser or owner assuming seller's loan. So this is going to be like one of your most important forms, and it's going to be in your assumption packet from the lender.
Randy, how you had mentioned how many like it was a stack
Pages.
of paperwork that you got when
Yeah, it
you
was probably
yeah,
about 15 pages of
okay.
documents, and some of them are a little confusing, even for myself, who looks at loan documentation all the time, because in my situation of the assumption, it was between veteran and veteran. And so you're trying to figure out, okay, is it the seller veteran or is it the buyer veteran? Who actually goes in this spot of this form? So you're just going to have to reach out to the seller, I mean, the servicing company, and make sure that you understand that you're filling out everything correctly, because again, they have 30 days to make a decision, but that's from the time that they receive a completed packet of forms.
Mhm.
So let's move on to the next one. So let's talk about what are some of the common questions. These are questions that we get all the time.
Mhm. So, do mortgage companies have to offer VA loan assumptions? And yes, they do, according to the VA guidelines. Um, on a VA loan, it's actually in your note that a VA loan is assumable. You can actually, I think it's on page 3 of the closing disclosure, also states if a loan is assumable or not.
Perfect. And do I have to use the same lender as the seller to do an assumption? Absolutely. So you're assuming exactly the same loan, exactly the same servicer. So you're going to be working with the seller's mortgage company.
Mhm. As a veteran, can I assume a VA loan for more than the amount of VA entitlement I have left? No. So the amount of entitlement you need to assume that loan has to be available on your certificate of eligibility.
Yeah, that's very important. We've had some veterans inquire whether or not they could pay the
Mhm.
25% of the difference to go ahead and make that up, and that's absolutely just not allowable.
Mhm.
So the seller has decided to stop making mortgage payments. Can I still assume the loan if the loan is in default? Now, if a veteran has like gone into default or maybe possibly a forbearance situation, it's not necessarily you can't do it. However, that loan does have to be current at the time of closing. So whoever brings that loan current, I'm not exactly sure which party, whether it be the seller or the buyer, it's a possibility. However, you just need to know that it does have to be current. So if you're the buyer, maybe you're having to come up with extra funds to be able to make that loan current. You're going to need to find out how many mortgage payments were missed and what you need to do to get it out of default.
How am I impacted if I don't opt for a substitution of entitlement with my buyer? Like, for example, if the buyer is a civilian or a veteran without full entitlement. Well, you now have given up your entitlement, right? Indefinitely. Or until that loan is either sold, or I mean, the home is sold and therefore the loan is paid off, or the person refinances. And if they have a 2.25, they're probably not going to refinance. Also, if they default or if they foreclose, that may be reported on your credit report, and it also will be on your certificate of eligibility as a compromise, which means that entitlement is tied up until you pay it off.
And that's the end of the presentation that we have prepared for you. However, please, if you're on, go ahead and scan this and take our survey, please. And then I think we do have a little bit of time to sort of open up for questions. So if we have anybody on that wants to, I see a hand raised already. So let me go ahead and open this up. Oh,
Can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. Well, first of all, thank you to Vetted VA for everything you provide. It's the greatest resource, maybe on the internet, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just getting into it. So I'm selling my home, VA assumption.
Mm-hmm.
We went under contract last week or agreed to terms, and then the buyer submitted all paperwork on Tuesday, a couple of days ago.
Okay.
I posted in the page, but our lender, so we have I don't know, I guess a requested close date of July 1st. Our
Mm-hmm.
lender notified the buyers when they called that they are selling our mortgage on July 1st to another company.
Yeah.
Doing
I
some
remember
research.
see yeah, I remember seeing that you had
Yeah.
posted that, and I don't have an answer at this point. Now, let us know, did you call the regional loan center?
So well, I didn't know what that acronym meant. I was actually going
Oh,
to
okay.
try to call the VA office of the Inspector General just to get some top cover, but regional loan office or center, right? I'll try them.
Here, I'll tell you
So
the
so
number
I
I
can tell you,
use.
I can tell you like specifically because I have like some refinance options that were kind of going through the same thing. And I mean, I know you have a tentative close date of July 1st, but I mean, the
Yeah,
goal is going to have to be to actually close before, or you're going to have to start all over with the new servicer. So it's
of
very
course.
important.
You go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's going to be very important for you to like complete the process, I guess, before that actual July 1st service date again, or you have to start all over with the new servicer.
Yeah, and that was my concern or question. And we are kind of toying with the idea of buyer possession before closing. I think all parties are on board with that. If we need
Mhm.
to, there's risks inherent with that. I understand.
Yeah.
But so one thing that the Form 26 tag 6381, that is the seller or application for assumption approval.
Mhm.
Who submits that and when? Because I've submitted a lot of or a few papers, but I
Mhm.
haven't submitted that, and I'm not sure if we are delinquent on that or if that's something that comes later.
That's the
So, do you
substitution
have a
of
point of, yeah, do you have a point of contact at your current lender?
We should have as of yesterday or today. They gave 24 to 48 hours to
Okay.
assign. Yep.
So when you requested that entire packet from your servicer, like whenever you started the process, what you're going to want to do is like make sure that you have, there is a checklist on there. So you should have a complete checklist of exactly all the documents that they're going to need to complete the packet. And that you're gonna have to give that contact information to the buyer because they are going to have to actually, I mean, I'm sure the buyer's not gonna hand over their income asset documentation, all of that stuff to the seller.
Right.
So that point of contact is gonna have to be shared with them, and then they'll just have to confirm with you and your real estate agent that they have completed the process.
Okay, so I haven't seen a checklist. I don't know that my listing agent has. Maybe. Um,
Yeah,
I'll
I
reach
would
out to
request
them.
it. I would request it from your lender. I would just be like, look, we have
I'm gonna
a
hop up.
timeline here that needs to be met. Please give us a checklist.
Okay. Yep. Got that. I got it. I'm taking notes
Yeah.
right now. So request checklist from lender. That should be easy enough because, like I said, we should have a point of contact.
And go
I
ahead
probably should have
and
had my checklist here available, but like mine came with a front page. So when you requested the assumption packet, then it should have given you a list of like all the documents that are required.
Okay, my impression has been that they are not interested in doing this. I think that's kind of commonplace.
It is very common. Yeah. So I actually, the funny story is that I actually requested my own, and then my servicing transferred as well. Like in the middle of the whole process, my servicing transferred as well. And so I
Yeah.
reached out to the new company. So the first company sent me everything that I needed, and they were like, here you go. And then when it transferred to the other company, they actually came back to me and said, we only accept requests for assumptions via fax. And I was like, well, let me get back in my car and drive back to 1999 so I can get a fax and send this to you. Um, but you have to comply. They're not trying to make it easy on you, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So it is possible that it just gets delayed, and we just deal with those hurdles.
It is possible, but if you haven't requested it from your servicer, that's the first thing is that you need to request the documentation. They need to
Yeah.
give you a list of exactly what they need.
Okay. Yeah, and in your opinion, I mean, before July, we've got what 66 days roughly. Should be enough time, right?
It's
I think it's
possible
really
if
going to
everybody.
depend on the, yeah, I think it's really going to depend on the service for you. But I would just be straightforward with them and just be like, we have two options here. One is to close as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Can you make that work? And then the second is we're going to have to start the process all over again after July 1st.
Yeah,
You know,
and I'm wondering if they're even incentivized to care either way. Like, I don't know what they're going to profit if by like what's in it for them to close
well,
early.
that's where you call the regional loan center and see if
Right.
there's someone that can help you move this along.
Okay, and
Yeah,
that was
because they
my
are
question.
required to have a credit decision.
Who is the regional loan center for North Carolina? Or
There's a 1877 number that you can look for on the Veterans Administration. It's let me see.
Here,
It's the same everywhere.
I always call 1-877
yep.
827
Okay.
3702.
Okay.
And again, 877-827-3702.
Got
And
it.
there's a phone tree. So you're just gonna, click through and talk to someone. There's
Okay.
probably not an assumption only. You're gonna talk to someone in underwriting. It's probably who you want to talk to.
So I see Sierra also has her hand up. Let's make sure that
Okay.
we respect her
Okay.
time and get a
Yeah.
Thank
question.
you. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Sure.
Hi, thank you, Brandy and Stephanie,
Sure.
for the presentation. So I am a buyer, currently on the hunt in the DC area. And I wanted to know if you all had any tips, being that we're in this area that, while yes, there is likely to be a higher concentration of assumables, it's a
Mhm.
very hot and fast moving market. Do you have recommendations for buyers to make their application more appealing, given that this is just more work, more time compared to their other offers?
I think my tip for you would be, I mean, how are you obtaining financing for the gap? You know what I mean? So, it's very important if you want to have your offer accepted that you provide that documentation to the seller. There is something on the lender side that we call a verification of funds. And in some cases, if you feel comfortable sharing that information, like your bank statement to show that you have the funds available, like to the agents or
Mhm.
whomever can verify that information, that would make your offer stronger.
Mhm. And I think just a communicative buyer's agent, right? Someone who's going to pick up the phone, call the listing agent, explain the situation, say that you're willing to provide, the financing gap information. We're willing to provide your certificate of eligibility to show that you have full entitlement, and as communicative as possible.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you come with all the documents, like really
Mhm.
the documents are that you just have everything that you did to get pre-qualified, plus your verification of funds and your certificate of eligibility, then you let them know that you are ready and willing to like go down the process with them.
Great, thank you
And
so
we
much.
have Casey. Oh, sorry, Sierra, were we done? Did we finish?
Yes, I was just saying thank you.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much. All right, Casey.
Oh, I think
Okay, his
Casey
hand's still up.
was the one, yeah, that the
Warren
first
Coggins.
question.
Warren, do you have a question? Mr. Coggins?
Well, let's
You
see
have
if
to
there's.
unmute. Did he leave?
Oh,
Okay.
he jumped off.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Were there any questions in the Facebook chat under the?
Not on our side so far.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks, Jerry. All right, cool. Well, I guess then we are done. So
Yeah,
thank you
thank
so
you,
much for
everybody.
everybody. And then if you have questions, you can ask them in our vetted VA group.
Mhm.
If you're not already a member, please jump in. And if you're a professional, head to our vetted VA for professionals only, and we will answer your questions there. Thank
And
you.
Brandy and I are always willing to answer questions if you needed to message us too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.